one I opened with is one of the Zen anecdotes about the original Buddha, founder of Buddhism, Shakyamuni Buddha. He used to give talks, which later became written down as sutras, as holy texts. He used to give a lot of these talks on a place called Vulture Peak in India, in Bihar. I got to visit there once. It's pretty dry now. It's supposed to be more lush in those. And they have little spots. You can hike up the mountain, and there's little spots where supposedly the Buddha gave this talk or that talk. Anyway, one day he went onto Vulture Peak and sat down to give a talk, and all his disciples, monks and nuns, it's called the fourfold Sangha congregation, the monks, the nuns, the laymen and laywomen, and also all kinds of celestial bodhisattvas, and huge throng, huge audience. They couldn't do that now with COVID. Rock concert. What's that?
They can live stream.
Yeah, they can live stream. We were all in attendance, and we all got quiet and waited for the Buddha to start speaking. And he just sat still for a long time, like today. No one had a question. We were all expectant and waiting, and just sat there in silence. Finally, he just reached down and picked up a flower, raised it up. Then one person in the audience smiled in response. And then the Buddha said something fancy like, "I have the treasury of the true Dharma eye. Now it's been transmitted to Mahakashyapa," who was the person who smiled. So in that huge congregation, only one person smiled when the Buddha lifted the flower. But in our congregation, all of you smiled when I lifted this fir branch. So you're doing pretty well. So does everyone understand that story?
Intellectually, yes.
Oh, that's very close. You can see my pores. When I watched some of the recent videos I went up to test the sound, I noticed how much I rub my hands sometimes. A lot. You all notice that? Oh, good. It seems excessive to me. I mean, it's cold, and my hands are probably cold, but... So you only get it intellectually? How about now? little intellectual. It's an anti-intellectual lecture. So normally the Buddha gave talks that are easier for a larger number of people to get and maybe smile at. But they are somewhat intellectual, using the intellect, using words to point beyond words, which is good, that can be done. Sometimes you have to be more direct. So instead of talking about how there's just presence happening, Buddha just did an action that has no intellectual content. Just maybe something that will get your attention more on presence than if he had done nothing. It's an intellectual idea, it's not so important, but if you're burdened by thinking one kind or another, even just the anticipation of getting a teaching, wondering if you'll understand it, if it'll help you, thinking about how much understanding you have, or how your spiritual practice is going, or how bad it is, and you don't have understanding. And then somehow your attention is just brought to presence. If you give yourself to it, it's a great relief. And so Mahakasyapa smiled. All that hoping to learn and all that hoping to attain and develop yourself, find a successful life, whether in a conventional way or a spiritual way, all that can suddenly be relieved. Just realizing there's just a flower in the hand.
That's funny because while we were waiting, I was trying to reconstruct this quote that I read during the week that at the time I'm yeah, that's a pretty good way to say it, but this was by far, I'm oh yeah, there's pine leaves. I wasn't seeing that, and it's just way better than some quote that's just it's still removed. That's the thing. So and I looked at Bala and just the way his eyes were moving when you held it out, that kind of made me laugh too.
Jumset carried the conversation farther, picked up his own branch. You can just keep going and going.
I also was reading on that same blog, someone posted the quote about just wash your bowl. He was asking some teacher about what should I do next, just wash your bowl, and then someone in the comment section actually started putting meanings the bowl is yourself, and and someone else is no, it's not conceptual. It's so interesting how people are always trying to find meanings in these teachings that just it's not what it is.
And at the same time, we shouldn't disparage, we shouldn't look down on using words and ideas sometimes, because that's what somewhat people are more ready for, or sometimes the same person can be more receptive to words than direct teachings, and sometimes more receptive to direct teachings. So it's okay. But we have to ground ourselves in that final direct understanding that it's already all happening. It in that moment of seeing that, there's just total release, total relief. That doesn't mean, issues won't come back, thinking mind comes back. Our habits are strong, and in this world where habits of thinking mind are very common. All the different body minds. But as you clarify just presence, that the only real relief is just the vibrant happening right now, beyond any analysis of it or understanding of it, picture of it, just what's happening. That's the only true relief, because anything your mind fixes on, grasps, holds, analyzes, compares, there's some level of discomfort already starting, some level of conflict. Removal from full vibrancy into compartments that can compete and cause confusion and conflict and dissatisfaction. So we just clarify over and over again. Relief is just here. Then someone wants us to make a decision about something. How do we fix the pipes in the house? And we get caught up. In a sense, that's the Bodhisattva. That's the Bodhisattva role. So the myth of the Bodhisattva is you have great insight into presence. You're ready to completely surrender all thinking, all thought, all going into past and future, and just become vibrancy itself with no person there. No you person, no other person, no past, no future, no decisions, no thinking, nothing. But then, right before disappearing into that forever, the Bodhisattva pulls back and stays in this world. The world where thought does come up, where self-idea does come up, where past and future does come up. And navigates the best they can through that, keeping the understanding that it's all just a dream. Keeping the understanding that knows real relief is only presence itself. So whether we like it or not, we're all thrust into the Bodhisattva role. And even the Buddha sometimes brings up thinking, brings up development and doing practices, but grounded in just, that's it. Much later, there's another Zen story. Has several parts to it, between Dongshan and his teacher Yunyan. I think Yunyan, if I'm remembering the names. And Dongshan is asking about the teaching of the insentient. There's this quote in some text that even the insentient is teaching the Dharma. Trees, the rocks, ground, everything's teaching it. Dongshan asks him, can you hear the teaching of the insentient? And Yunyan says, if I heard it, you wouldn't be able to hear me. And then Dongshan says, well, then I can't hear you. He says, well, if you can't even hear me, how can you hear the teachings of the insentient? Anyway, it goes back and forth for a while. But at one point, Yunyan picks up his fly whisk, kind of like this. This could be a fly whisk. Chase the flies away. It is a symbol of a teacher. And sometimes they have fly whisks. They're made of horsehair or something. Horse tail hair. And he lifts it up and says, can you hear it now? I think Dongshan was up for it yet. So that's the same. Can you hear it now? Well, this actually you can hear, so you should use that. Later, Dongshan writes a poem about hearing with your eyes, seeing with your ears. That just means it doesn't matter. Hearing, seeing, distinctions doesn't matter. It's just one presence happening. So that lifting of the flower is considered the first kind of Zen style teaching. Probably made up by the Zen tradition. I don't think there's records of that story of the Buddha outside of the Zen tradition. That's considered his deepest teaching, deeper than all the sutras. And then that sets up the tradition for Zen, saying that it's a teaching beyond the scriptures, not dependent on words and letters and all of those quotes. So then there's commentaries that different Zen teachers have written about all the koans or the teaching stories. And I think a common comment for that one is when the Buddha lifted that flower, he ruined everything. He made a big mistake. You can say that about all the koans. That whatever the teacher did, it was a big mistake. And then you can ask the student, if you're in like a koan dialogue thing, how do you fix that mistake, or how do you improve it? How do you make your own response to the situation that's better? Because anything you say is a mistake, because it can be misunderstood. There's always another way to do it, to get rid of that mistake. But then the new way you do it will have a mistake, because everyone makes some thinking. If you make a thinking about some teaching or something that someone does, then it's a mistake. If you don't make a thinking about it, then whatever they do is correct, always. So it becomes an art form. even if the flower was just a little mistake, then when the Buddha said, I transmit the Dharma to you, to Mahakāssyapa, that was a much bigger mistake. All kinds of crazy ideas you can make from that. And yet still, it's a nice thing to say, because you take this highfalutin thing, special power you think the teacher has, and it's going to give to you. It doesn't just have to be spiritual stuff. Anytime there's someone that you want something from, and you think you're dependent on that person, whether you're in a relationship or something. And he says, yeah, it's been done. You got everything from me just because you smiled. And he didn't think about it. Just like when I first lifted that branch and you all smiled. You didn't even think about it. It was already, that's what it means, inherent Buddha nature. It's already, everything's there. The question is, can we let go, when we're suffering, can we let go of what we're suffering about and just smile at the flower, at the branch? Everyone in that crowd couldn't do it. They were waiting. What does it mean? What does the teacher mean? I'm no good because I don't understand the teaching. Or maybe the Buddha's become stupid because he can't think of the text say today. So all kinds of anxiety and thinking about what does this mean? Judging the Buddha or judging yourself. And Mahakāssyapa just smiled. Oh, it's a flower. He just lifted a flower. That's all he's going to do today. Then later there's more words too. The right time and place and for the right people. But our essential practice is realizing there's nothing but the flower. There's nothing but this happening. That's where everything we long for is. That's where our freedom is. Something we can't create. We don't have to create. We don't have to worry about creating because it's happening already. It's not us. It's not me. Meaning, not the idea I have of me. The idea I have of me can just dissipate, and what I really am is just happening. It's all taken care of already. It's all taken care of. Sometimes really hard to feel that. Sometimes for me, still, really hard to feel that. So we keep practicing and be kind to ourselves, try to be kind to each other. Really, when we support each other, come together in community. I've been thinking and talking about this a lot because I've been feeling somewhat isolated. I think a lot of people are with COVID. we come together and support each other, we can relax. Physically we can relax, our mind can relax. And when we're relaxed and someone lifts a flower, we really see it. Or even if no one has to lift the flower, we just see the flower, or we see the twig, or we see anything. And we realize this is enough.
I mean, hearing the anecdote you said, and also I've heard previously that if someone is fully present, it helps those who are around, the person is interacting with. And I've also heard of many stories about Ramana Maharshi, that he never says anything. Apparently he just sits in silence. People come and sit with him in silence, and then they feel like they experience something profound, and it has a lasting impact. So that's why he never wrote any books, and so I've heard that. So I'm just curious, in your experience, how if you have experienced anything like that, or
Sure. I think you have too. I think we all have. You know, if it's a famous spiritual teacher and you've worked yourself up about it, you have a big idea about it, you might feel something extra special, and you might remember it as an extra special thing because you went and sat in front of the great teacher. But similar things happen all the time, but we might take less note of it. But, I mean, that's what this story is about, right? Akashapa just smiled because he just gave up. It's a matter of you giving up. So it's not a matter of the teacher imposes enlightenment on you, like as if it's irrelevant, your mind state, when you come, and it's just, they're so great, they're just giving you stuff. No, they're making a suggestion that there's nothing we need to do. So if Ramana Maharshi just sits there, he's making a suggestion to everyone that we're already complete. Everything's finished. And if people, they might see someone else just sitting there and they don't think anything of it and they don't feel anything. So they say, that's a regular person. But then they see Ramana Maharshi do it, and they have the mind that Ramana Maharshi is a font of wisdom and is enlightened and whatever. So whatever he does is the teaching, and then they see he's just sitting there, and then there's just sitting there is the teaching, and then that realization dawns in their mind. And then they might attribute to, oh, I got some special power from Ramana Maharshi. Then they didn't understand what really happened. But that relief of, it's okay just being alive. It's more than okay. It's all the beauty and love and joy that we've been seeking is in just being alive. So you might not understand that intellectually, but if you see it manifested, there's a connection there. You intuitively see, oh, just being alive is so beautiful. If you start making up stories, oh, he has a special level of just being alive, then you lose it. He never claimed that. So it's not that there's special power. I mean, you can say, yeah, it's special power. Everything's special power. Everything's a miracle. It is. And if some people just live that way and demonstrate it by not needing to do other things, then you feel it more from them. But it doesn't mean it's actually some material special power that someone has.
Could just be the reason why so many people like to be with cats.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And dogs. Animals in general. People connect because they're not thinking. as far as we can tell. They're present. The love scene, what's the word people use? Unconditional love. Because people thinking it seems like there's always conditions. But our nature is unconditional love, beneath the thinking. So if someone has some big experience, I mean, it's mostly up to, it's their causes and conditions of their mind in that moment, you know. It can be set off by anything that just makes you give up. So if someone just sitting there, seemingly happy without having to do anything, if that elicits it to you, then that elicits it to you. But it doesn't really happen. That release, that relief doesn't really happen. Unless you recognize that's not a power of Ramana Maharshi. If you think, oh, Ramana Maharshi is so beautiful, if the teacher is so beautiful, this other person is so beautiful, or so skilled, or so talented, or so happy in life, and I'm not, you can't get that relief. You might get something like, oh, I'm so happy to be in their presence. It's exciting, because maybe I'll get something from them. But that's not the real relief. The real relief is Ramana Maharshi, or the teacher, or whoever, is the same as me. It's just awareness happening. Awareness is happening here, and awareness is happening there. It's the same awareness. Ramana Maharshi sitting peacefully there is my awareness. So in that moment of really seeing, when Mahakasyapa smiled at Buddha holding the flower, it wasn't like he smiled because, oh, what a great teaching. He smiled because he was the flower. He was the Buddha. And everything else, too, that he saw and felt. It was just one thing happening, and he saw that's all there is. That's why he smiled. That's why the Buddha said, I now transmit it to you. He didn't transmit anything. He just said, you have seen that you are me and the flower and everything, and it's happened. And whether it happens or not, it's true. Whether you have an experience, a particular experience of it or not, it's just how things are. So it's only when that separation between the teacher or anything inspirational and yourself drops away that you get the treasure. You don't get the treasure. You've always had the treasure, and you realize, oh, I've always had the treasure. Just to comment, as far as I know, of the actual historical story of Ramana Maharshi, he did talk. He didn't just sit there silent. Originally, he had a vow of silence for a long time when he was younger. He wasn't really teaching then, as far as I understand. Mostly sitting in a cave on Arunachala. I guess people brought him food. Maybe he came down to get food too. I don't know. But when they actually built the ashram for him and he came down to live there, I think he started to talk at that point. When people started to gather, he gave teaching. And I'm sure he knew people were writing it down. There's a couple of videos you can see on YouTube of him. There's no sound, unfortunately. He's walking around. It's all a little sped up. He's walking around a little. He's reading the newspaper and seems pretty ordinary. Petting his pet cow. He had quite a limp, though, as he got older. Excuse me. I slept so well last night. So is that good? I don't know if that's so satisfying. You know, certain people, we feel that not so uncommon, you know. They don't have to be great masters. Maybe great masters are more consistently inspiring in that way. But you notice when a little young child like yours or even younger, maybe they don't see one of their parents for a while, and then they turn around and see their parent, or the parent picks them up, and they look into the parent's eyes, and it's just a big smile. It's pretty much the same thing. Everything's okay. You're here and I'm here, and together there's one thing here. And it's complete. So anxieties can be dropped. It's good to be around people who remind us to relax and everything's here. It feels good. Not if it's forced, though, or fake. That doesn't feel so good. Better to be around people that are as honest as possible. And we are allowed to be as honest as possible. We're encouraged to be honest. And be honest is the first step. Right? We confess where we are. And then much easier to let it go. burden ourselves. And we become empty and we can just see the flower. And it fills us completely. That's what we always want, to be filled completely by what is, instead of having your space filled with worries and concerns based on self.